Good day, everyone. Today we are to talk about the basics and the principles of parliamentary procedures, particularly the Robert's Rule of Order. But before that, I would like everyone to know that we have different types of parliamentary procedures being employed by the different organizations as well as the government. For example, we have the Western style of parliamentary procedures being used by the British Parliament, the European one, as well as some Asian parliamentary procedures being used by the Asian parliaments as well, Asian countries. So let's proceed. Basically, parliamentary procedures are rules for conducting a successful meeting. And we have here the four goals of parliamentary procedures, which are the following: to extend courtesy to everyone, focus on one thing at a time, observes the rule of the majority while ensuring the rights of the minority. Okay, so for today's discussion, we are to talk about the Robert's Rules of Order, written by U.S. Army General Henry Martin Roberts. So, why should we be using the Robert's Rule of Order? So, technically, we have two reasons. First and foremost, this is to make decisions efficiently as well as to reduce or eliminate conflict. Now, I'm not saying that the Robert's Rule of Order is the only parliamentary procedure which has these concepts. However, it is very much applicable in either large or small meetings. That is why. What are the basics of the Robert's Rule of Order? Number one, we have a fair debate. We preserve the rights of the minority and the absent, as was stated earlier. The right to know the meaning. The minority are given time and the opportunity to protest. However, it's still the majority to decide. All votes are counted equally, and business transactions are fair and is conducted in good faith. So, before we proceed to the motions, for example, or the terminologies or the basics, we have to first know the terms, the parliamentary procedure terms. So first and foremost, we have here the Constitution. So what is a Constitution? These are the Articles of Incorporation, which contains the name and the purpose of the organization or the group, and this is rarely changed except on amendments. And then we have here the bylaws, which may be changed uh, through amend through amendments, which is defined by the amendment section. This contains the officers, or what are the officers rather, the duties of these officers, the different committees, etc. And this contains also the recommended time for meetings for for the chair or for the persons involved to be notified just to protect absences. And for the bylaws as well as the constitution, this requires a two-thirds majority vote before it is being implemented technically. Some others would constitute these two as one, which is called the constitution and bylaws, as well as some others aside from this constitution and bylaws have enacted their own internal rules and regulations which governs their meetings and which supplement the constitution and bylaws. The third one, of course, what is a quorum? Quorum is half of the members in a club or in a group or in an organization plus one. This means the minimum number of members that must be present at a meeting for legal business to be transacted. So, some other IRRs or internal rules and regulations contain the own definition of quorum, as well as some constitution and bylaws. However, uh, in most organizations, it is commonly accepted it's half of the members in a club or in an organization plus one. And please take note that a quorum is different from a majority. Majority is half of the members present at any meeting plus one. So it's still half plus one, but for majority, these are for those who are present only, active members. Minimum number of members that must vote for a motion for it to pass. So that is the definition of majority. So again, for a quorum, this is the minimum number of members that must be present at a meeting for this meeting to proceed, while a majority is the minimum number of members that must vote for a motion for it to be passed. Aside from these ones, aside from constitution and bylaws, quorum and majority, we have also here the different terminologies being used. For example, the presiding officer, or simply the chair. The chair leads the meetings. The chair ensures that procedures are properly observed, and most, if not all, of the organizations refer the chair or the presiding officer as Mr. or Madam President, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, or Mr. Chairperson or Madam Chairperson. Now, for us to be, or for those who are upholding gender sensitivity, they say chairperson instead of chairman or chairwoman. During meetings, everyone gets a chance to voice their opinion or debate. This would be discussed later on. And everyone gets the chance to vote. It's either a yes or a no, or it depends on the way the vote or the division of the assembly is being called. And there are four methods of voting. This is what I am talking about a while ago. We have here through voice or viva voce, ayes or nays. It could also be by standing, especially in large organizations. We also have here roll call and secret ballot. Now, the question is, can the chairman vote? The answer is yes. In order to force a tie or to break one if they are a member of the group. However, technically, if you are the presiding officer, you cannot really vote. But if it is provided on the internal rules and regulations or in the constitution and bylaws, then the chairman or the chairperson can vote. The chair ensures rights are preserved is the important role of the chair. Now, the members should understand how and when to use these procedures. Now, who has the most important role among these two? The question is everyone, the chair and the members, they both have uh, they are being important or they are significant for the meeting to uh, move forward. So, other parts of this parliamentary procedure basics, only one topic at a time can be discussed, and the person who makes a motion has the right to discuss it first, of course. And if there are meetings, sometimes or most of the times, you will see a gavel, and this symbolizes power and authority being used by the presiding officer or the chairperson to give instructions to the members, and each number of taps have a specific meaning. Okay, so one tap This follows the announcement of adjournment, a completion of a business item or a motion, and this also means that members should be seated. If the gavel is tapped twice, then there is a call to order, or the meeting is called to order. 3 taps, all members are required to stand, and if there is a series of taps, then that means the chair is ordering everyone to behave on a meeting or restores order to a meeting. When we do meetings, when we use the parliamentary procedures, we have here some guidelines. First and foremost, let us be courteous. Therefore, we have to use titles, either Madam Chair or Mr. Chair or the Chair, instead of saying Maria or Mario. And for the chair, he or she should avoid personal pronouns like I and you. Instead of saying I rule, he would say or she would say the chair rules the motion is, uh, then he or she states the motion. For the members, basically stand when you speak so as that you would be seen or so as that you would be heard, especially if you are in a large meeting or in a large crowd. And when you make a motion, you have to address the chair and not the individual. So, for example, you would say, Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, and look at the chair when speaking. And while speaking, you have to maintain a courteous tone. You should not use an angry tone. And in large groups, please state your name, perhaps an identification. Before the meeting starts, we have to check the 3 items. These 3 includes a quorum. So before you start a meeting, you have to verify if a quorum exists. As what has been stated earlier, the quorum is the minimum number of people that is required for a business meeting to proceed. So you have to check a quorum, and that is again 1/2 plus 1 of the members, or it could be given through the constitution and bylaws or the internal rules and regulation. The next one, the agenda or the order of business should be present, especially in large groups. In some other organizations, they would give the list of agenda beforehand for the members or for the officers, so as that this agenda should be approved, because if there is no agenda, then there is no meeting. And for large groups also, they designate a parliamentarian aside from the chairman. So what is a parliamentarian? A parliamentarian is basically an advisor to the chair and to the members, and this person can be asked to clarify, or however, it is still the decision of the chair if this parliamentarian will be uh, asked for clarification or not. Uh, these are oftentimes applicable in large crowds when some or most of the people would ask again or have a point of information or a point of inquiry. Now, if errors or violations of these parliamentary procedures are committed, the parliamentarian gets the chair's attention. And when this parliamentarian gets the chair's attention, it should be inconspicuously as possible, so as not to negate the the chair or the chairperson. Now, as what we are talking a while ago, we have here the order of business, or technically the agenda. So a meeting should have a set of agenda. It is the purpose of the order of business so as that it could keep the meeting moving forward. The agenda forms the framework for the development of a good business meeting. Now, the order of business is part of the bylaws or the internal rules and regulations. For example, we have here the steps to the order of business. So, number one, the call to order by the president and the opening ceremonies by the officers. Then the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting to be read by the secretary and to be approved by the body in accordance to organizational bylaws and parliamentary procedures. We also have here treasury reports on the financial standing of the club or the organization, the reports on chapter program of activities by officers and committee chairmen, the unfinished business or business leftovers from the previous meetings. Please do note that we term this one as unfinished business and not old business. Afterwards, after disposing the business leftover, we have the new business to be presented by the members in the form of motions. Then, if there are no other uh, new business, or if there are no discussions for this order, then they proceed for adjournment and closing ceremony. For the order of business, how does one conduct the meeting as it is laid out in the order of business or as it is laid out on the agenda? The order of business is handled by using various motions and rules governing them, which are part of parliamentary law. So later on, we would be talking about the different types of motions and how should we dispose these motions using the proper procedure. So the first part is the call to order so as that the meeting would start. And as what was discussed earlier, before we call for order of the day, we have to take note that there is a quorum. So the chair would simply say, I call for the order of the day. And for some other organizations, members are allowed to call for the order by simply stating Mr. Chair for or Madam Chair for recognition and stating the call to order. They would say, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, I call for the order of the day, and this does not require a motion for approval or for second. It's not amendable, it's not debatable, and this does not require division of the assembly or a vote. The chairman would simply reply, order of the day has been called for, so the meeting will now please come to order, and tap the gavel. If you remember the different meanings of the number of taps of gavels, you would know the number of taps for call to order. After the meeting is called to order is the uh, reading of the minutes of the previous meeting. However, in some other organizations, it is already stated in their internal rules and regulations as well as their constitution and bylaws that there is no need for the reading of the minutes of the previous meetings if it is printed out or is emailed to the different members and chairmen of committees. However, if it is not stated in the constitution and bylaws and then the IIRR, the member would simply ask for recognition and state the motion using the suspension of the rules. He or she would say, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, I move that we suspend the rules on the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting since the secretary had already given printed copies or had emailed us uh, the minutes. Now, in some other organizations, it does uh, it does not require motions to approve, but basically, if it's a motion, then it needs seconds. So the members would say seconded or I second the motion. Then the chair would say, are there any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes? This statement does not require a motion to approve. And if there are additions, the members would address it to the chairman and then to the secretary of the organization. And if there is none, then the chairman would simply say the minutes stand approved as distributed, or simply the minutes stand approved as corrected. Also, in some organizations, another member would make a motion saying, I move that the minutes of the previous meeting stands approved and be adopted as part of the organizational records. It needs a second, and it does not require discussion. The chairman would simply say, is there any objection? If there is none, the minutes of the previous meeting stands approved. That is for the meeting minutes. After the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting, we have here treasurer's reports or committee reports. A treasurer's report is an officer report, hence it does not require a motion to approve. Same true with committee reports, because these are statement of facts. If there are unclear informations, a member would be allowed to raise a hand and have a point of information or a point of inquiry uh, to be given to the person involved. Now, what are the types of motions? We have here number one, the main motions, then the subsidiary motions, the privileged motions, the incidental motions, and motions that bring a question again before the assembly. We first discuss main motions. So how should we dispose these main motions? The main motions are used to introduce new ideas to the meeting and must be stated in the form which would start as I move that or I move to. And this motion cannot be in a, or cannot be stated in a negative form. And if there is a main motion which is laid down to the chair or addressed to the chair, it requires a second. This motion is amendable and debatable if it is already laid to the assembly. And for the main motion to be passed, this needs a majority vote. So how should we dispose this main motion? First, the member rises and states Madam Chair or Mr. Chair and wait for recognition. Then if the chair recognizes the member, he or she would say, Maria Di Magiba has the floor, or simply, yes, Honorable Di Magiba. Now, the main motion should always contain the following: five W's and the H, or the five wives and the husbands. We have the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. Now, this includes funds, or what we call the dollar in meetings. If the member is recognized, he or she would now make the motion, which simply states as Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, I move that we purchase a sewing machine.
Now, please take note that when you will be making a motion, please do not use the personal pronouns I. So, uh, and make it your own. Like, I make a motion. Instead, since it's a motion, we always use the word move, not make. Then the chair never makes motions, only the members. If the member has already stated the motion, other members would be calling out, saying, I second the motion or simply seconded. For, for this time, there is no need for recognition of the chair, and for some organizations, a single member who would say seconded or I second the motion would already constitute the whole of the members of the organization. Members may or may not agree with the motion, and the motion is up for discussion. Now, if the chair hears a second, he or she would state, I have a second. Now, if he or she doesn't hear any second, he or she would ask, is there a second? Or do I hear any seconds? It should be repeated twice. Now, if there is no second, the chair would simply say, hearing no second, let's proceed to the next item of business. That means the, the motion laid upon by this member is already dead, hence it's not recorded in the meeting minutes, except if these are for resolutions, which doesn't need seconds. Number 7. Before placing on the floor, the chair may suggest modifications before the group owns the motion and amendments may be necessary. And the chair may request the secretary to restate the motion to ensure the meeting minutes are accurate, and the member is requested to confirm if it is recorded correctly. Before the chair places the motion on the floor, he or she also should restate the motion, saying, there is a motion that we purchase sewing machine. Are there any discussions? These words or this phrase would imply that the motion is already placed on the floor, ready for discussion. The motion now becomes part of the assembly and is up for discussion or debate. Now, this time, all further action requires assembly approval, just like amendments and amendment of amendments. Remember, we have two levels of amendments. Please do note that the person who makes a motion cannot speak against it, and he or she always has the chance to speak first during the discussion. And for better discussion, there should be alternate speakers uh, who favor or oppose the motion. And the chair should watch body language for the basis for determining those who are in favor and those who oppose the motion. And while there is a discussion, and a speaker cannot interrupt another speaker, or a member cannot interrupt another speaker, and to speak, the member should stand and wait until he or she is recognized by the chair. Now, everyone is given opportunity to speak before anyone speaks twice. After speaking twice, a member exhausts right to speak unless if it is otherwise stated in other manners in the CBL or the Constitution and Bylaws, and then the IRR. The chair cannot make motions and cannot join in debate unless control of meeting is relinquished and chair is replaced by someone else, often an officer. So the chair can always relinquish his or her position to join the discussion. However, in most organizations, this is not the case. The the members are the ones who do the debates, and then the chair does the presiding. The chair cannot interrupt unless rules are violated, same as true with the parliamentarian. Then we have members must address the chair and not the individuals. So when speaking, the member would always say before stating something, Madam Chair or Mr. Chair. And during the meetings, members must be courteous always, and members cannot speak more than 10 minutes without group approval unless bylaws designate a different time limit, or if there is a motion to limit or extend the time of debate. When debate wanes, or when the debate is over, the chair would ask, are you ready for a question? Or simply, are there any discussions? There being none, let's proceed. Are you ready for a question? When the chair would ask this, this means, are you ready to vote? The chair closes the debate after everyone has spoken twice. Now, the chair restates the motion, having amendments or having amendment of amendments and other subsidiary motions presented. The chair calls for vote. When we say vote, it's always mm, parallel to saying division of the assembly. When we say division, this is used when a member disagrees the chair's ruling, and division does not need a second, or that nor does the member have to be recognized. The chairperson should ask for a counted or hand vote. This would be discussed later. For voting, we have different types of voting. We have voice vote. For example, the chairman would say, those who are in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those who oppose, please say nay. There should be different answers for those who favor and those who oppose, because if they would say both ayes, then it is not uh, proper, as well as it is not uh, to be used, not to be adopted. For aside from voice vote, we also have counted votes through standing or raising of hands. Then we have ballot voting or secret ballots. They write the vote on a piece of paper and place in a location to be read by the president after everyone had casted their votes. The chair and members can abstain when voting. If there is a tie, the motion is technically defeated. If vote is not clear, the chair calls for a visual count. This is what we are talking about earlier, that is the division. For large groups, they use rising or standing vote, and the member may also call for the division of the assembly to force visual count, especially if the voting system is unclear or the voting result is unclear. When does the chair vote? Okay, so the chair does not vote unless it is specified in their internal rules or constitution and bylaws, or unless if it affects the outcome. We have here two cases. The case one, if the vote is a tie, the chair always votes to approve, so as that there should be a motion. The motion should be approved. For case 2, for example, if 6 is in favor and 5 oppose, the chair votes no to defeat. That means the the motion should not be on records of the secretary. However, if the vote is if the votation or the division is conducted through ballot, the chair may vote. Afterwards, the chair announces the results, say by simply saying the motion is or is not adopted. Then the secretary records this in the minutes. What are the contents of this one in the minutes? The motion itself and the person who made the motion, and amendments are not recorded, only the end result is recorded. If amended, person who made the amendment is recorded. For example, the motion made by Maria Di Magiba and amended by Dodong Di Maano. So that is the content of the minutes by the secretary. In short, these are the steps to handling a main motion. Please take note of this one. You stand, ask to be recognized by the president or the chair. The chair recognizes you by name. The motion is correctly stated. Motion is seconded. Motion is repeated by the chair. The motion is discussed. President restates the motion. The motion is voted upon, and the result of vote is announced by the chair or the presiding officer or the president. However, there are main motions that are not legal. For example, if this motion breaks any local, state, or national law. Why? Because organizations, for example, should not go against the laws or the laws of the land. They should not uh, do or they should not state unconstitutional motions. Main motions also that are not legal includes one that brings up a previously failed motion, items that are out of the power of the group, the negative motions, as well as political and religious support. Next, we have here subsidiary motions. So aside from main motions, we also have here subsidiary motions. What are these subsidiary? The subsidiary motions assist in treating or disposing main motions or the main motions. Subsidiary motions take precedence over main motion and other subsidiary motions in ranking order. Please take note, only one main motion at a time is permitted, while it is permitted to have multiple subsidiary motions. All subsidiary motions requires a second. So we have here lay motion on the table. This motion is used to defer action on the motion until later in the meeting or until the next meeting. This requires a second. This is not amendable. This is not debatable. And this needs majority vote. And a member cannot interrupt another speaker. How should this motion be stated properly? It's simply, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, I move to lay this motion on the table. Then state the time for discussion. Next, previous question. This is to force an immediate action on the motion. Again, this requires a second. This is not amendable. This is not debatable. And it needs two-thirds majority vote, and a member cannot interrupt another speaker. Now, when we use this one, we have to go back again to the main motion and simply to force an immediate vote, especially if the discussion is going too long. How should we state it? Simply, Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, I move for the previous question, or Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, I call for the previous question. The next one, the limitation or the extension of debate, or to limit or extend the time of debate. This is to limit or lengthen the time allowed for discussion on a motion when it is clear that there will be an excessive amount of discussion, or when the amount of time for the meeting is limited. Again, this requires a second, and this subsidiary motion is amendable. What is to be amended? It is the amount of time or number of speakers only. The amendment, as well as this motion, requires a two-thirds majority vote. However, a member cannot interrupt another speaker for this one. So, before the discussion, this should be first given priority before amendments take place, or before the discussion takes place. How should we state it? Simply, uh, gain recognition from the chair and state your motion. Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, I would like to limit the debate to 3 minutes per speaker, or I would like to extend the debate for from 3 to 5 minutes per speaker. Now, the maker of the motion must specify the amount of time and the number of speakers that can debate on the motion. Here are other examples. Mr. Chair or Mr. President, I move that we limit debate on this motion to 3 discussions for the motion and 3 discussions against the motion. Another example, Mr. President, I move to limit the debate to a minimum of 5 minutes per speaker. This is to avoid the very, very long discussion, or to avoid the consuming time for discussions. Next, postpone definitely or postpone to a certain time. This motion allows the motion on the floor to be deferred to a different day, meeting, or until after a certain event. This requires a second, amendable, debatable, majority vote is needed, and of course, a member cannot interrupt another speaker. The proper example, for example, is Mr. Chair, I move to postpone this motion until the December regular meeting. Of course, if it requires a second, then the members would say, I second the motion, or seconded. However, if the if some of the members doesn't like the certain time for postponement, they would do discussions. That's why it is amendable and debatable. Afterwards, it requires a majority vote for this motion to be passed. Next, refer to committee. This is used to send a pending question to a small group so that the question may be carefully investigated. This requires a second, is amendable, debatable, majority vote is also required, and you cannot interrupt another speaker. There are two ways to appoint. There are two ways to appoint a committee. For number one, we have here standing committees, or one of the 15 listed in the program of activities, or standing committees being recognized or organized through the constitution and bylaws of the organization or the club. And then the second is the appointment of members to make an emergency committee or a special committee appointed by the president or the chair, in which number of members can be 3 or more. The president must specify when the committee should report back to the chapter, usually the next meeting, and this committee or this special committee can be given full power to act on the motion, specifically if the motions requires uh, expertise of such committees. How would we state this motion? Mr. President or Madam President, I move that we refer to this motion to the Leadership Committee, or I move that we refer this motion to a committee of 3 appointed by the chair. That's the proper way on referring to the committees. Next, we have here amendments. This is used to modify or change a main motion. This must be closely related to the original topic, or the amendment should be closely related to the original topic. Amendments can be given in 4 ways. Number 1, inserting in the middle or inserting information in the middle, adding to the end, striking out or striking some irrelevant informations, as well as number 4, striking out and inserting new information. Amendments requires a second. Amendments are also amendable until the second level. That's why we have amendment of the amendment. We also have here the amendments are debatable, of course. It needs a majority vote. Amendments can also be reconsidered, and it cannot interrupt another speaker. Now, improper amendments includes the following: anything not germane or related to the main motion, frivolous or absurd, leaves an incoherent wording. So these are informations that is not necessarily required for the main motion. How is this amendment uh, given? For example, we have here the main motion on the floor. The chapter hold a cookout for all FFA members. How should we dispose the amendment? So we have here, Mr. President, I move to amend the motion by inserting on March 1 in front of cookout. So the motion would read, I move that the chapter hold a cookout on March 1st for all FFA members. So that is the amendment. Now, we have here the amendment of the amendment. So with this amendment, if there are discussions, it should also be in here. So for the amendment of the amendment, or the second level amendment, a member would say, Mr. President, I move to amend the amendment by inserting at 1 p.m. after March 1st. So the motion would read as, I move that the chapter hold a cookout on March 1st at 1 p.m. for all FFA members. Now, how should we discuss this one, or how should we dispose this ones? First, we have to mm, discuss the second level amendment if the group agrees to it. If it is approved, then it is retained. If it's not, then we proceed to the second level amendment. So we have here the list of priorities: amendment of the amendment, and then the main motion. Next, postpone indefinitely. This is to kill a motion or a main motion with no provision of bringing back. This requires a second. It is not amendable, however, it is debatable. Majority vote is required and can be reconsidered only if passed, but is not recorded in the meeting minutes. Technically, if the members doesn't want to take part in the main motion, they would give or state this motion, or postpone the motion indefinitely, so as that the motion would be eventually killed with no provision of bringing it back to the assembly. How should we state it? Simply, Mr. President or Mr. Chair, I move to postpone this motion indefinitely. Aside from these ones, aside from the subsidiary motions, of course, We also have here privileged motions or motions of privilege. We have here fixed time to which to adjourn, which is purposely to set the time and sometimes the place for another meeting to continue business of the session, especially if the session would be time consuming, which could be until midnight, for example. This requires a second. This is amendable, not debatable. Majority vote is needed, and it is to be stated as follows. Mr. President or Mr. Chair, I move to postpone the pending resolution to the adjourned meeting set for next month. So the time is fixed to which to adjourn. And of course, adjournment, it is to end the meeting. It needs a second. It is not amendable. It is not debatable. It requires majority vote, and a member cannot interrupt another speaker, and this is sometimes being called for by the chairman or the president, or it could be from the members. If it is from the members, the motion would be stated as follows. Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, I believe there are no more discussions, so I move for the adjournment of this meeting, and it needs a second. If not, the president or the chair would say, uh, if there are no other discussions, uh, the meeting is adjourned. We also have here recess. This allows for a short break in the meeting, especially if there are heated arguments or heated discussions. This needs a second. It is amendable. What is to be amended? It is the number of minutes or the time for recess. It is debatable also. Majority vote is needed, and motion for recess must specify the length of time in the motion. For example, Madam Chair or Mr. Chair, I move to take a 5-minute recess. Next, raise a question of privilege. This allows for people in the group to ask for changes in the temperature, for ideas to be clarified, for motions to be explained, for others to repeat their discussion or motions, and anything that may help the meeting run smoothly. So this does not need a second, and also not amendable and debatable as well. And there is no vote. The president or the chairman decides if he or she allows the member to raise a question of privilege to be directed to any of the other members. And you can interrupt another speaker if you want to raise a question of privilege. Like, for example, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, I would like to request that we lower down the temperature of the air condition here in the meeting area, or uh, to ask simply for clarifications. Mr. President, I rise to a question of privilege. This is the proper action to be done. Then the president says, state your question. Then the member says whatever they have to, and the president decides on whether it will be allowed or not. Call for the orders of the day. This is purposely to force the group to return to the set agenda without finishing the current business. This is usually disposed before starting the meeting as well as ending the recess. This does not require a second. It is not amendable and not debatable, and two-third majority vote is needed, as well as anybody can interrupt another speaker. Call for the orders of the day can only be made on motions that are not on the set agenda for that meeting. For example, Mr. President, I call for the orders of the day. This is to start the meeting, and the President should say orders of the day has been called. All those who wish to return to the orders of the day, raise your hand. All those opposed to returning to the orders of the day, please do the same sign. This is for ending a recess, for example, or indefinite recess. Aside from these ones, we also have here incidental motions. We have here appeal to reverse the decision of the chair after they have made an error. For example, uh, this requires a second, and it's not amendable but debatable. Only motion where the president can discuss and it needs a majority vote, and a member can interrupt another speaker to appeal for the decision of the chair, especially if the decision of the chair is not clear, or if the announcement of voting results are not clear. Most of the time, you should support the decision of your president. Okay, please remember that. However, if you are to make an appeal, you should properly say it. For example, Mr. President or Madam President, I appeal the decision of the chair, and the president or the chairman recognizes you and say appeal of the decision of the chair has been called. All those who wish to uphold the decision of the chair, please say aye, and all those who oppose, please say nay. Again, most of the time, you should support the decision of your chairman or your president. Next, we have here the division of the assembly. This comes after the appeal to the decision of the chair. This forces an immediate revote by hand. This does not require a second, not amendable and debatable, and no vote is needed, and a member can interrupt the speaker. This can be made by saying division loud enough for the entire group to hear, or by standing and saying, I call for the division of the assembly. Next, we have here division of question. This allows a motion that has been made to be split into two different motions. This can only be made on motions that have two main ideas that are not dependent on each other. This does not require a second. This is not debatable, not amendable. No vote is required. However, you cannot interrupt another speaker. How should we say it? First, we should say, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, I move that the chapter have a cookout on March 1st for all FFA members and to have a basketball tournament. So, in this motion, you can see that we have two discussions. There should be two discussions in here. We have here the cookout and then a basketball tournament. And so, uh, during the discussion, we have here the incidental motion on the division of a question. The member would say, Mr. President, I move that we divide this question into two motions. The first is stating we have a cookout on March 1st, and the second that we have a basketball tournament. Then we have here objection to the consideration of a question. This is used when a member thinks that the activity or action of the group is not appropriate. Now, this does not require a second, not amendable and not debatable. Two-thirds majority vote is required, and a member can interrupt another speaker. How should we dispose this motion? Simply, for recognition, of course, we say again, Mr. President, I object to the consideration of the question. The President should say, objection to the consideration has been called. All those who wish to consider the motion, raise your hand. All those who object the consideration, please also raise your hand. Next, we have Parliamentary Inquiry. It is to obtain information on a matter of parliamentary law. This does not require a second. This is not amendable and not debatable. No vote is required, and a member can interrupt another speaker to inquire. For proper examples, you have to rise and say, Mr. President, I rise to a parliamentary inquiry. And the President would say, the member will state the inquiry, and then the member state the question, like asking on how many votes are needed for a certain motion to be passed, or how many minutes again is to be used for the discussion per speaker. That is for parliamentary inquiry. Aside from parliamentary inquiry, we also have here the point of order. This is used when a member thinks that the rules of the group or the rules of parliamentary procedures are being violated. This does not require a second, nor amendable and debatable. The President decides on the verdict if the point of order is to be taken or not, and a member can interrupt another speaker to point the mistake. Mr. President, I rise to a point of order. And then the President would say, state your opinion. After members state points, President would say, your point is well taken, or your point is not well taken. That is the point of order. Next, Suspender Rules. This allows the chapter to break the rules of parliamentary procedure or the current constitution for a short period of time. This requires a second, however, it is not amendable and debatable, and two-thirds majority vote is needed. However, a member cannot interrupt another speaker just to suspend the rules. An example in here, Mr. President, because of the lack of time tonight, I move to suspend the rules and move directly to new business. So, in short, suspend the rules on having the regular order of business like treasury reports and committee reports and unfinished business. However, please do note that before you start a new business, you have to finish all other necessary things that are unfinished from the previous meetings. Withdraw a motion. This allows for the maker of a motion to completely take it off the floor for discussion. This doesn't require a second, not amendable and debatable. If made before the president first states the motion, and it is automatically withdrawn with no second or vote. If made after the president first states the motion, the following steps must be taken. President must ask if anyone objects to the maker withdrawing the motion. If someone objects, it must be seconded and passes with majority vote. If no one objects, the motion is automatically withdrawn. Withdrawing a motion cannot be made after discussion had begun. And to dispose this motion, simply say, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, I would like to withdraw my motion. We also have here motions that bring a question again before the assembly. We have here reconsider or motion for reconsideration. This is to reevaluate a decision made earlier. However, this requires a second. It is not amendable but debatable. it requires majority vote, and a member cannot interrupt another speaker just to make this motion. If passed, the motion to be reconsidered is handled as if it was never voted on. This can only be made by a person who voted on the winning side. If passed, the motion is handled immediately if only a main motion with amendments is on the floor, handled after the current business if discussion on referred to committee or postponement has been started. That's a motion for reconsideration. Motions that can be reconsidered are the following: main motions, amendments, refer to committee, postpone definitely, previous question, limit or extend the debate, appeal, and fix time to adjourn. Motions that can be reconsidered if passed, this includes postpone indefinitely. Motions that can be reconsidered if failed is object to consideration of question and motion to rescind. An example in here: Mr. President, I move to reconsider the motion to have a cookout on March 1st for all FFA members. To rescind is to repeal a previous action. This requires a second. This is amendable and debatable. This requires two-thirds majority vote without prior warning. However, a member cannot interrupt another speaker. How should we do this one? Simply have the attention of the chair to be recognized and then state the motion. I move to rescind the motion adopted at the January meeting to have a cookout on March 1st for all FFA members. Also, we have here take from the table or take motion from the table. This is to take a motion that is on the table off the table. This requires a second, not amendable and not debatable. Majority vote is required, but a member cannot interrupt another speaker. For example, simply say, Mr. President, I move to take the motion that the chapter have a cookout for the members of the table. So, take from the table. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you have learned something out of this discussion, as well as I recommend also everyone to watch other videos for further knowledge regarding parliamentary procedures. And for my class, I will be giving you a sample or a script sample of a meeting which uses the parliamentary procedures for you to have a basis on the mock meeting that we'll be having soon to be scheduled. But as for your activity, first, when you receive the script for the meeting, which utilizes the Robert's Rule of Order, I would like you to make your own script uh, by using the different motions, as well as I'll be giving the uh, topic for you to discuss during your meeting. For those who wanted also to have a copy of these ones, you can comment uh, on the comment section below, or leave a trace on the comment section below, and then we'll discuss about it. Again, thank you for listening, and I would like to say sorry for the unnecessary noise that you've been hearing all the time during the discussion. We're on a countryside, and so we really cannot avoid unnecessary noise as well as dog barks. Thank you very much for understanding, and have a good day.